The Messenger of Hell vs. the Wind God, Yabuki vs. Ippo Makunouchi, two iconic sport manga characters, the man who inspired it all against the man who is the best ongoing manga. A dream fight impossible, but I dare to dream. This video will feature spoilers. Let's just begin. Firstly, Joe has the cross counter and triple cross counter, essentially a special move where he throws a punch, taking his opponent's own punch, using that momentum to increase the strength of his own punch. Say that fast. Essentially reflecting their punch onto them, which is 4 times the power. The triple cross counter reflects 12 times the power of a normal punch. A punch so powerful it shattered Wolf Kanegushi's jaw and brought the greatest world champion Jose Mendoza onto his knees and on the verge of a cardiac arrest.
Fetch me their soul!
Point being, this is deadly. Now, I cannot say Ippo can't take punches, but when the man considered untouchable was crying in the ring against you, it shows how deadly you are. Another strength of Joe is that unwavering belief, that determination, the ability to get up and charge down his opponent no matter what, because he is insane by all forms of logic. Joe can take punches a lot better than most boxers. He eats them for breakfast. The best example against this would be Jose Mendoza, whose main gimmick was his corkscrew blows, highly damaging punches able to fracture a skull. Yet in this fight, Joe eats them. Joe's main strength is probably his outright unpredictability. He's not quite like Wally or Harry Mao in terms of flipping and doing everything, but his style can be confusing. But Joe's punches are a lot harder than people realize. He has punched people out of the ring, but more later. The hardest part about Ippo for me is which Ippo we use, as peak Ippo for most people is the one that is retired from boxing. But despite that fact, Ippo is guaranteed to be stronger. Ippo has the Dempsey roll, probably the best move in his arsenal, an insane barrage of punches capable of knocking down insanely tough boxers like Sendo, and that wasn't even the new one. The new Dempsey roll is the main strength and advantage Ippo has over Joe. It's a move that was able to confuse the actual world champion before Sendo cooked us. If that move had went ahead though, it's pretty likely that Volg would have been in a coma. Joe will 100% have the reach advantage for this fight. Joe is 5'11" compared to Ippo's 5'5", giving him a significant height advantage, making it harder for Ippo to land punches towards his face, or meaning he has to get closer, which is Ippo's style. But Joe has the range to pick at Ippo from afar, and despite Ippo's current growth, there's no reason for me to assume that long range is not a flaw against Ippo. Secondly, as Ippo is weak to counters, it's a flaw from the beginning of his career, and despite improvements in his defense, there's no reason to assume that counters are still not going to be a prominent issue. But it's not just the issues, it's the cross counter as I mentioned. This can change the entire complexity of our fight instantly. The cross counter is 4 times the power of a regular punch, and triple is 12 times. We are talking about Ippo, someone who can eat punches, especially from guys like Sendo, Gonzalez, and maybe even Hajime. But has he ever faced 12 times the power of a punch hitting him? No. That is something that will probably give Joe a knockdown at the minimum. Now, naturally, Ippo could adapt to this or come up with a strategy to deal with this counter, just like how Wolf did, or brunt the force like he's Carlos. But I do think that Ippo's method for this would be like Rikishi's slip into an uppercut, or trying to brute force his punch first like Miyata does. As despite the cross counter's devastating damage, Joe is still eating a punch himself, and Ippo's power probably surpasses most of his opponents. Despite providing Joe with an advantage, this is an issue depending on Ippo's power. Now some might say, Chazza, do you think that Joe could adapt to the Dempsey roll? And I'm sorry to say, but Joe could 100% adapt to both versions if he gets the time. Joe is simply too quick thinking and analyzing. Despite certain beliefs, Joe's IQ is genuinely incredible when it comes to fighting. Joe has repeatedly adapted to changes in his opponent's strategy that provided him with flaws. It happened against Carlos. Both men were having a chess match in the ring, and every time Carlos went ahead, Joe simply adapted to moves that had previously knocked him down. The Dempsey roll's first version will not be hard to avoid, as it is a simple rhythm that most people already know about, and very weak to counters when Sawamura decapitated him by leaping back. Now, could you imagine what would happen to Ippo if the cross counter landed mid-Dempsey roll?
Die the virgin!
I don't care about weight classes, that could literally kill him. But the new version is not simple, as it is not actually known. We haven't got to see it properly, but it's punches from every other angle, getting rid of the original move's flaws in exchange for its unpredictability and damage. Without a doubt, Joe would have the hardest time adapting to this move. In the first time it's used, Joe will end up on his ass, as it's a move you cannot possibly conceive for your first time of fighting. But the second time will be different. And I want you to understand, I am not biased when I say Joe can adapt to this move. He was able to see through Carlos's punches of light, and you can say anime only.
Suck on my dick!
But these punches are faster than the Dempsey roll, and yet Joe was able to catch them. But I want you to keep in mind, just because he can adapt to it does not mean he can counter Ippo, as if he does, both men would be hit with a disgusting level of damage, as the Dempsey roll's destructive capabilities surpass most things in Ashita No Joes. In the same context, a move quite similar in a manner of speaking would be Chom Chom. It's basically like the Dempsey roll, it's a fast barrage with just less weaving. Now you could say every combo is a Dempsey roll, but that's beside the point. This is a technique that has killed 2 people, and no one who faced that move have gone up, and yet Joe did. Because Joe's level of drive is something that surpasses Ippo's own, based on the manga for the present moment. Joe's drive is deeper and more complex, not because Ippo is a coward, but because of the psychological nature that stems from Ashita No Joes. Joe's drive is do or die, but it's also Joe's presence in the ring. Joe is intimidating, but I don't mean like that. Ippo's mentality has improved over the manga, and he can keep his feelings and emotions in check more consistently. But how do you do that when you're fighting a man who doesn't care about his fate? I think if Joe did this, Ippo would shatter mentally. That doesn't mean Ippo would shit himself and throw in the towel, it just means watch out for the beast. Ippo and Joe have both beaten or drew against people who were significantly more skilled than them. The best example for Joe would be Carlos, and I'll say Wally for Ippo. If I'm to work under the assumption that this fight plays out how normal fight go, Ippo will be planting his feet and charging Joe down. Even with his newly improved defense, this is dangerous against a boxer whose natural instinct surpasses his. Ippo's offense, despite how simply powerful it is unironically more of a weakness than his strength. Perfectly captured in the Kojima fight. He charged forward and he got caught. This is the main issue outside of things I've said. I don't like power scaling, I think it's really dumb, but Joe's combat IQ and fighting IQ is better than Ippo's. We can debate this all we want. Ippo's main weakness is his unwillingness to think outside the box. He has 100% done this, and he never really uses the ring to his advantage. Joe uses the ropes to propel his punches. He uses unorthodox methods. He'll get so fired up, he might even foul, just like Joe vs Carlos in the manga. I should also talk about Ippo's charging. As we all know, Ippo's growth in the manga has been insane. And despite the fact I did mention the height and range disadvantage against Ippo, Ippo does have a higher chance at leaping into Joe as he can get into his rhythm, which is Ippo's main strength. Even Ippo's most highly skilled opponents in the manga struggle due to this rhythm. It is very repetitive, more specifically pre-retirement Ippo will have a significant advantage in power, as even if Joe is able to move out the way of the punches, the ones that do land will obliterate him. This also happened in the Rikishi fight. While Joe was able to dodge most of the offense, even the slightest graze did brutal damage, so there's no reason for me to assume that Ippo cannot do the same. But there is something I should mention. There is a core difference. One is a bantamweight and the other is a featherweight. One has more weight, therefore obviously more muscle. Joe is taller, but he weighs less, so you would assume that Ippo wins based on his higher weight translating into more power. However, that's not quite accurate, as we are talking about a professional boxing ring fight. In the professional ring, there are rules. Ippo cannot drop to bantamweight, as that would be suicidal. Joe will never go up to featherweight because of the story of Ashita No Joes. In Ashita No Joes, Joe is told he should go up to lightweight. However, there is one weight class that isn't real, a weight class that can work for both men. Catchweight. Catchweight is unrestricted weight class not recognized in the official sport. Joe's weight around the Kim fight was 118 pounds, which was the full limit, but if we make it a catchweight fight, Joe isn't leaving the bantamweight by definition. Some people might disagree with this, and I tell you to buy a monkey.
Dumbass.
Joe Yabuki would rather die than go up a weight class, as it goes against his entire character. So we are using a loophole. Now this channel is about honesty. That's a lie, it's about unbiased. Mostly unbiased. I think we all are in agreement if Joe and Ippo fought in their respective weight classes, the winner would be Ippo. He weighs more and he has more power because of this. That's how it works. If Ippo had to drop weight, he would be on his Rikishi Takamura era and then Joe would easily win. I think we can all agree, a present to the Hajime no Ippo manga, Ippo is a stronger boxer with a larger range of skills compared to Joe, who is built on pure instinct and an unnatural level of adaptation abilities. Ippo has a better teacher, but Joe is the more naturally gifted boxer. I'm pretty certain Ippo has the potential to knock Joe out with his arsenal based on our rules. I don't think it would be with the Dempsey. I'm confident Joe adapts to it. It would probably be a nuclear level uppercut that I hit Jimmy or Take with. However, if it goes to a decision that isn't a draw, this is Joe's win. Joe doesn't get decisions, he would prefer to get knocked out. But if we're going to go by decision, Joe wins mainly because of the earlier rounds, as this is where Ippo will have his toughest battle. Ippo is used to fighting opponents who are taller than him. Pretty much all of them are. And it's hard to know the tallest one he's fought, but the general idea is it's Mashiba and probably Kojima. And much like when Joe fought an opponent significantly taller than him, Ippo would spend the first couple rounds gorging his strength and where he has to land. I do understand Joe is not the kind of boxer who hits you once and then runs away, but Ippo's punches would factually have a harder time landing until he outright lowers his guard, as then he is hunched over. Joe wins the first rounds easily, not because Ippo isn't skilled, skilled because Ippo can't get the range. Also, let's just say it's 10 to 12 rounds like a championship fight. Gedo was able to keep Ippo at bay due to stupid gimmicks. Joe doesn't have those gimmicks, but he's a better boxer than Guido. The rhythm of this fight probably changes around the 5th round, as Ippo would already have his wisdom from Kamigawa and would be able to recognize Joe's methods. The fight comes down to a durability contest, and both men are durable. Ippo's main weaknesses are Joe's core strengths, vice versa. Ippo's only real losses always came to counters. Ippo survived a punch from a lightweight who would drop down to kill him. Both these guys punch way too hard for people from their weight class, which is something people forget, and I do think I'm ready to give my answer. And I will clarify before I say it, it is my legit opinion and I'm not saying this to hide away. Within our rules and guidelines, it ends in a draw.
Everybody just fucking calm down.
I'm not saying this so I don't offend a community. I will tell you why I think this. Joe is a significantly more naturally skilled boxer, but Ippo is way better trained, and he's actually the better boxer. So you would argue that this could give him a KO victory. Ippo's power outmatches his by a significant margin, but that doesn't mean Joe can't use his power to his own detriment. Ippo would never get hit by the cross counter 3 times in a row. People don't understand how good Joe is. Joe's punching power is not on the same levels as Ippo's, but it is above average for someone of his weight. Joe was able to fight the strongest champion in the world while having a lethal amount of brain damage, and despite that he was able to beat the living shit out of the champion, and he took his soul in the ring. Jose's punches were able of knocking down people above his weight class, but someone whose body shouldn't be able to function ate them. And if we associate it with regular rules, of course Ippo wins. If Ippo has to drop down, of course Joe wins, which is my main issue I had when doing my research and setting aside my love of both characters. I do think the creators have spoken about this and they gave a winner. Why are they acting like they know so much about the story?
燃えたよ。燃え尽きた。真っ白にな。